We widen the lens a bit, and we're looking at the top 10 right fielders of the divisional era. That's 1969 on. Bob Costas is back with me right now. Bob, I love this, and that by picking this time frame, which is, again, 51 years, but if we brought it back a few years, there's no question, in my mind anyway, Roberto Clemente, Al Kaline, maybe Frank Robinson. I know you're still thinking Hank Aaron, but a lot of the all-time greats, certainly Babe Ruth is long gone, that dominates this position. We have a whole fresh group of players to look at and to rate.
Yes, and for example, on the center fielders, if we had gone back even to the expansion era, let alone that would begin in 1961, let alone, let's say, the second half of the 20th century, then you're dealing with Mantle and Mays, and you'd be dealing with Ted Williams among the left fielders if we went back to 1950. But our arbitrary cutoff was the divisional era. And as I look at my list, if you're going to put Hank Aaron on the list at all, and I'll explain why I am, you cannot put Hank Aaron behind anyone. Now, Robinson, as you mentioned, Frank Robinson, Clemente, Kaline, not enough in the post-divisional era. But Hank Aaron had one of his very greatest seasons in 1971, one of the most important moments in baseball history in 1974 when he passed Babe Ruth. And when you look at his overall numbers for 69, let's say, through 74, 75, 76 with the Brewers as a DH is just a tack on. But 69 through 74, he was still a very impactful player. I have him at number one. Tony Gwynn, the 8 batting titles, impossible to ignore. Was Reggie Jackson more emblematic of the era and a bigger star in a certain sense? Yes, but the 8 batting titles elevate Gwynn. Reggie Jackson goes to 3. Ichiro Suzuki, I was in love with him as a player from the moment he set foot in Seattle in 2001. Ichiro Suzuki is 4th. Larry Walker, tremendous combination of defense, base running, OPS. The knock against him, he wasn't that durable a player. But when I compared him with Vladimir Guerrero, it was razor thin, and I give the edge to Walker. Winfield and Dawson are both in the Hall of Fame. Mookie doesn't have enough of a resume yet to elevate him above 9th. And our ground rules were that while we would take PEDs into consideration, it didn't eliminate anybody. And therefore, I include Sammy Sosa on the list as 10th.
Okay. Yeah, there's a lot of gray area in what we're doing here. I opted not to use Hank Aaron for this era. Aaron was 35 years old in 1969, and you're right, he had some outstanding years, led the league in hitting one year, but he was playing fewer games. He wasn't the same type of player, whereas, again, Willie McCovey, Carl Yastrzemski were dominant. They were, the man in their respective leagues, so I put them in. So here we go. I don't have Hank Aaron, and again, obviously, Robinson, Clemente, and Kaline are gone. So number one, and you know what, Bob, I crunched the numbers, and I was surprised. I really thought that it would come down to Dave Winfield. Tony Gwynn was my first pick. I thought Andre Dawson was pressing, and then there was a bit of a drop before I got to Vladimir Guerrero, Gary Sheffield. But Reggie Jackson, clearly the best hitter of this group. For a 12-year period, he had an OPS plus of 154. Compare that to Gwynn, who was at 135. I have Dwight Evans at third, and he's at 133 for his 13 to 14-year period and a superior defensive player. Dave Winfield was a great player, but 138 OPS plus for his best 12 to 13 years. So Reggie was the guy, and no question, when you think 1970s baseball, it's Reggie. Reggie Jackson, I think, is the clear-cut number one. Tony Gwynn was a unique player, a marvelous player in a lot of ways. That's why I have him up at number 2. Dwight Evans is one of the most underrated players in the history of baseball. Bobby should be a Hall of Famer. He was a great defensive player for the first half of his career, an outstanding offensive player the second half of his career. Then I have Winfield and Dawson a little higher than you do. Then Guerrero. Sheffield deserves to be there. I like that you picked Mookie Betts, by the way. I didn't have any active players in there. Betts is clearly on his way. Then I've got Larry Walker. And you know what, too? And I know, Bob, you probably struggled with this. Dave Parker. Dave Parker makes my top 10. He was one of the best players in baseball for a couple of years there.
No question. There are guys, and this comes into play when we talk about Hall of Fame, too. There are guys whose total resume may not measure up with some others, but they have the distinction. Unlike many Hall of Famers, there are many Hall of Famers who were never called at any time the best for a period of time in the game. Dale Murphy was in that conversation. Don Mattingly was in that conversation. Dave Parker was in that conversation. So Parker just missed my list. I'm very glad you got Evans in there. He is a perpetually underrated player, a superior right fielder, great arm, great range, big hitter, especially when considered in the context of his time. So I'm glad that you got Evans in, even though I didn't. And from a conscience standpoint, I would have felt better with Evans somewhere on my list and Sammy Sosa not. But since PEDs were not an automatic since PEDs were not an automatic disqualifier, I felt that with 360 home run seasons, no matter how they were achieved, that Sosa deserved a nod.
Yeah.
Because he was an important player in his era.
No, he was. No question. He shouldn't be expunged from history. I just wouldn't choose to put him on my list. And I don't know if I want 15 years of Dwight Evans, 15 years of Sammy Sosa, Bob, I might take Dwight Evans, even though those were a great, 5 years or whatever they were from Sosa.
Dwight Evans was a tremendous player, an admirable player, and deserves serious Hall of Fame consideration.
Absolutely. You know what? Looking back, you know who jumped out at me besides Reggie, which should be obvious? Andre Dawson. Andre Dawson, I wondered, how high up the list does he go? I found him at number 5, but if you go back to the younger Andre Dawson, right? We're looking at peak before his legs went out on him. How many guys he didn't walk, which is something I always value, get that on base. But besides that, wow, Bob, what a tremendous high-level, upper echelon Hall of Fame player.
Yeah, and he's another guy who, for a period of time, we're not talking about 1 year, an MVP year, or a Player of the Year type season, but for a cluster of seasons, he was in the conversation. Who's the best all-around player in baseball? The thing that does hurt him a little bit, I think legitimately, not just for those who are completely wedded to the analytics and the sabermetrics, but legitimately, it does take him down a little bit that he doesn't have the on-base percentage, which of course diminishes the OPS.
Oh, when he came up for the Hall of Fame, and I did the study on that, Bob, I thought, what if a player did everything great but didn't walk? Could he still be an all-time great player? And I think the answer is yes. This was enjoyable, Bob. I hope we got a kick out of it. We had to put our powers to the test and had to look at a whole new crop of players. It's been a lot of fun, Bob. Really enjoyed having you on.
Thanks, PK. See you soon.